It's Rasicus here with a video because the Japanese Nintendo website released some new and very substantial pages with info related to Splatoon's lore, and there's a surprising amount of completely new or otherwise obscure information. Now, I started on this video when this website first came out earlier in July, and the goal of this video was to translate and summarize all this info, but before I could finish the script, to my surprise they actually did officially translate the website into English. It's still on the Japanese Nintendo website, which is a little strange. However, there's translation errors on the English website that even people who don't know any Japanese have noticed. So what I'm going to do in this video is summarize all this information, like what I initially planned to do, and much of the wording in my summaries are not going to match the text on the screen because, again, I wrote most of the script before there was an English version of this website, so hopefully that's not too bothersome. But now that we do have an English version, I'm also going to highlight anything that was notably changed in translation or mistranslated. Information that's more common knowledge to Splatoon fans I'll breeze through, while stuff that's new or not really well known I'll give more attention. For example, some information here I recognize but was only previously mentioned in a developer interview or some other Japanese-only source. Also, here and there I'll throw in some relevant trivia that's not on the website itself. There's 4 sections on this website: Story, Characters, World, and Fashion. The Fashion section came out the most recently, and it gives some general descriptions of gear brands and weapons. The World section consists of some basic descriptions of all the locations in Inkopolis Plaza and Square. There's nothing really new or groundbreaking in either of these sections, so I'm not going to cover it in this video. What I am going to go over are these first 2 sections, one of which is the Story section, which covers the history of the Splatoon world and the Inklings and Octarians. A lot of the info is stuff that we already know, but it's a really nicely put together summary, and there's a few new bits here and there that I'd like to talk about. Now, the character section is what I will be spending the most time on because that has a lot of information. Alright, enough introductions. I'm going to start off by hopping right into the story section. The first page is titled Creatures from Long Ago, and talks about how 12,000 years ago, the world's inhabitants suffered from repeated environmental destruction, abnormal weather conditions, and a continually rising sea level. The professor noticed this and predicted the human race would go extinct. So to keep his cat, also known as Judd, alive, he gave this cat an immortality serum, put him in a cryosleep capsule that was set to wake up in 10,000 years, and made clones of Judd's cells in case he didn't survive the freezing process. Then the sea levels did not stop rising, and eventually the human race perished as well as nearly all land-dwelling species. Sometime later, a highly intelligent species of squid emerged and began to come to dry land, and gradually evolved to take on a more humanoid form. The next page talks about older Inkling history and is titled Turf War Beginnings. It says that Inklings that came to the surface began partaking in turf wars around 2,000 years ago, and while there's many differences between these ancient and modern turf wars, the basic rules are pretty much the same, and it was around this time Judd woke up. Additionally, it was not only squids, but octopuses moving to the surface, and at that time they didn't have any bad blood with each other and would partake in intercultural exchanges. Next page is about the Great Turf War breaking out, and is titled The Great Inkling and Octoling Clash. About 100 years prior, the sea level rise became more serious, and so do the fights for territory. The Great Turf War breaks out between the Inklings and Octarians. The Octarians win the first battle because the Inklings couldn't wake up early, and the Octarians have the Great Octo Weapons. But the Inklings were able to launch a counterattack when one of the Octarians' weapons got unplugged. One of the units in the Inklings faction was led by a young Captain Cuttlefish. Then the Inklings are eventually victorious, with Judd determining the winner, and the Octarians were driven underground. Now here's finally a new piece of information. It says that not long after that final battle, the Great Zapfish was born. Previously, it's been mentioned that the Great Zapfish is 100 years old, but it's never been specified exactly when it's born, so that's cool. The next page covers things that happened a little time before the events of the first Splatoon game, titled The Relations Changed Between Inklings and Octarians. It talks about how turf wars became popular among young Inklings who would leave their homes in the countryside and come to the city of Inkopolis. Around this same time, the Squid Sisters made their debut, starting with the song City of Color. Meanwhile, the Octarians face an energy crisis, steal the great Zapfish and other smaller Zapfish, and Captain Cuttlefish takes action and forms the new Squidbeak Splatoon with his granddaughters Callie and Marie. The next page is titled A Nameless Hero's Story and covers the story mode events of the first Splatoon game. The squid that we now know as Agent 3 wanders into a manhole, finds themselves in Octo Canyon, meets Captain Cuttlefish, and is forcibly recruited into the new Squidbeak Splatoon. They're tasked with getting the Great Zapfish back. Agent 3 eventually fights DJ Octavio and succeeds with the task that they're given, with the support of the Squid Sisters. The calamari incantation that played during the fight influenced many Octarians, like Marina of Off the Hook, and an Octoling we know of as Agent 8. Great Zapfish is retrieved, and the day is saved without anyone really noticing, because, the whole Squidbeak Splatoon and the events of story mode happened in secret. Next page is called Changes Over Time, and talks about the events that happened after the first Splatoon game and before Splatoon 2. The Squid Sisters begin to experience some miscommunications between each other. Meanwhile, in the Octarian world, there's some changes happening. Marina escapes from the Octarian society to the surface alone and meets Pearl and eventually forms Off the Hook. Sheldon moves his shop from the plaza to the square. Lil Judd is born. Next page, the events during Splatoon 2, titled A New Wave Surges. Real quick summary, the Inklings began gathering in Inkopolis Square, and the hot new thing aside from turf wars is the slightly dangerous part-time job of Salmon Run. It involves attacking hordes of Salmonid to acquire golden eggs, and the operation is run by the mysterious Grisco Industries. Inkopolis Square's energy source, the Great Zapfish, goes missing, as well as Callie, and the Inkling world quietly falls into crisis. While Captain Cuttlefish and Agent 3 are patrolling deep in Octo Valley, Maria is left alone in Octo Canyon and recruits the young Inkling who wandered into a manhole as Agent 4. Agent 4 is tasked with retrieving the Great Zapfish, eventually clashes with DJ Octavio, and a brainwashed Callie. Sheldon and Marie helps get Callie back to her old self, DJ Octavio is defeated, and once again the city is saved in secret. The final page is titled An Octarian Tale and is about Octo expansion and the events following, including the start of Splatoon 3. First, I want to bring up this artwork over here, which, if I recall correctly, I don't think has been shown in a proper digital form, as I only remember it appearing in Haikata Walker before, so it's cool to see it being used here. Now on to the page itself. Captain Cuttlefish and Agent 3 were on patrol deep in Octo Valley, and encountered and battled an Octoling. After the battle, Cuttlefish is separated from 3 and falls deeper underground with the Octoling. They land in the Deep Sea Metro, which is operated by Kamaboko, and the captain names the Octoling Agent 8, who lost their memory due to the impact of the fall. They work together to try and reach the surface. At the same time, Off the Hook finds the captain's communication device on the surface, and Pearl Marina provide support. On the way out of the deep sea, 3's consciousness is taken over by Kamaboko, but 8 wins over this hijacked Agent 3 after a fierce battle. The website mistranslated this, saying that 3 won, which we all know didn't happen. The final obstacle is the mastermind behind Kamaboko, Commander Tartar, who attacks Agent 8 and the gang with the giant statue of a human, but they're able to beat Tartar and make it to the surface. After that, more Octolings start coming to the surface and battling with Inklings. And then sometime later, Splatoon 3's events begin to unfold, and the stage shifts from Inkopolis to the Splatlands. A young Inkling, or I guess Octoling, you can make Agent 3 an Octoling too, who makes a living with the mysterious small fry companion, becomes Agent 3 of the new Squidbeak Splatoon. And from there, it says to be continued. If you've been keeping up with the Splatoon series, then yeah, that whole story section doesn't have much of anything new, but it serves as a nice recap. With that out of the way, now it's time to move on to the character section, where I'll be going through every single page of character information shown here. If it's well-known information, I'll go over it pretty quickly. If it's less known, I'll spend a bit more time on it. The chart uses arrows to show what all the characters think of each other. If you're familiar with the official relationship chart that was released in 2019, much of the arrows are extremely similar, if not identical to the ones on there, so I'm not going to talk too much about the arrows. But there's a few new arrows and ones that have been updated, so I'll touch on a few of those throughout. Now, first off, the player character from the first Splatoon game, aka Agent 3. I'll be calling them Agent 3 for the sake of simplicity. Agent 3 is described as surprisingly responsible. First section is basic information, talks about how Inklings are squids with the humanoid form, have an instinctive desire to express themselves, and like partaking in the sport of turf wars. Noteworthy tidbit here is that it mentions that the age that Inklings gain their humanoid form varies, but it's usually around the age of 14. Noteworthy because we're usually just told Inklings gain their form at 14, but the fact that there can be some variation to that age was mentioned in the first art book, so it's nice to see it brought up again. This natural variation, I think, would be the reason why Callie, Marie, and Pearl are shown in these sunken scrolls with their humanoid forms, despite seemingly looking younger than 14. The passage below just talks about Agent 3 during the events of the first Splatoon game, and this sentence here says that among the turf war crazy squid, you can even find some who battle in tournaments held in distant lands. I feel like this is in reference to real-life competitions, but it's also nice to imagine this means turf wars happen all around the Splatoon world outside of Inkopolis and the Splatlands. Down here it talks about how they got brainwashed by the Telephone and Octo expansion, and now here's something new. It says that they came from a region a little far from Inkopolis. They left their parents at age 14 and moved to the city of Inkopolis. The player character is referred to as a she in this passage. That is a mistranslation and not a canonical confirmation of the character always being female or something. Anyway, this bit is interesting because mentions of parents are rare in Splatoon, and it's pretty crazy that there are just 14-year-olds living on their own in Inkopolis. The story lines up with an old comic made during Splatoon's development, which was shown in the back of the first art book. It shows the player character being sick of living in a small town and hitching a train ride into the city. There's many details in this comic that they clearly didn't stick with in the final version of Splatoon, but it's interesting that they did, in fact, keep this core concept. Next, the player character from Splatoon 2, who also plays Salmon Run and is also known as Agent 4. I'll be calling them Agent 4 for simplicity's sake. Their description says that they're a pushover that's a little rude. First paragraph is again some basic information about Splatoon 2's Inklings. It confusingly says here that many squids seem to look up to two individuals who are particularly flourishing in Inkopolis life. Who are these two individuals, may you ask? Well, this is a mistranslation. It actually says something more like that the Inklings are following in the footsteps of those other Inklings who are 2 years older and made their debut in Inkopolis Plaza. Next is about Salmon Run, and it mentions that many Inklings who are usually easily bored wind up getting really into this part-time job. Underneath that is just about what Agent 4 did during the events of Story Mode, nothing new. A bit more interesting info at the bottom. On the left it says that Agent 4 was too busy with extracurriculars to watch TV, and that's why they didn't know who Marie or the Squid Sisters were. Once again incorrectly referred to as she. This info's a bit more on the obscure side and was previously mentioned in the second art book. To the right, we get a bit more of Agent 4's backstory. It says they came from a place about 40 minutes away from Inkopolis Square by train, so they don't have as much longing for the city as Agent 3 did. I believe this is a new piece of information. Now, going on to one of the Squid Sisters next, Callie. The original description here makes a callback to the Japan-only Bokeh vs. Tsukomi Splatfest, which is basically like a straight man, funny man comedy duo. She's called an innocent bokeh here, with the bokeh being the funny guy of a duo. I can see why they didn't bother translating that directly. Says that she's heavily reliant on her cousin Marie and loves the outdoors and being active. Tends to get in trouble for not minding her own business. Next paragraph is about the Squid Sisters' music, with City of Color being their first song, and the Calamari incantation bringing them to stardom. Her song Bomb Rush Blush even got the most diligent of Octarians to dance. Under that, it talks about how she got involved in other projects after leaving Inkopolis News, nothing new in the way of info here. The paragraph to the right here talks about her role in the new Squid Beak Splatoon and how DJ Octavio used the Hypno Shades on her. And to the left, it says their debut happened after the performance at a youth singing competition in their home region caught the attention of one of the judges at the competition named Shaiho Shai, who then went on to become their manager. This information is a bit more on the obscure side. It was previously mentioned in the Splatoon album jacket. There's even a demo version of City of Color sung by Shai Ho Shai with slightly different vocals. Now on to Marie. Says that she has a unique sense of naming things and is a tsukomi who does things at her own pace. Tsukomi being the straight man in the bokeh tsukomi comedy duo. She's always looking out for her cousin Callie, and she doesn't really like both indoor heating and air conditioning. Second paragraph is mostly the same as Callie's, except saying that they perform during Splatfest and have experience performing in distant lands, which is in reference to the concerts in real life, most likely. Below that, it talks about her radio show targeted towards students studying for exams. It says it's called Mari's Musings, but in Sunken Scroll 20, the same show was named Problem Solved Studying with Marie. So there's a fun little localization inconsistency. To the bottom left is about her role in Squid Splatoon and Splatoon 2 Story Mode. And there's a mistranslation here. It says that Captain Cuttlefish recruited Agent 4 when we all know it was Marie who did that. And to the right, it says that she had a part-time job at Walleye Warehouse, which was mentioned in Splatoon 1's stage dialogue. Touching on the arrows, since the ones between Callie, Marie, and Agent 4 have been updated since 2019 to reflect their relationship after Splatoon 2's Story Mode. Callie says, "I'm home," and Marie says, "Welcome back." Marie says to Agent 4, "Thanks for all your help," and Agent 4 says to her, "Sup." Now on to the next idol duo, Off the Hook, starting with Pearl. First paragraph is her basic biography, mentioning that she has a voice with a destructive power, but after meeting Marina, has successfully learned how to control it. It's not stated in here, but in the second art book, it was mentioned that Marina mixes in backing tracks to cancel out the destructive sound waves of Pearl's voice. Next paragraph says that they do Inkopolis News, and that she thought of the Squid Sisters as rivals, but the two duos hit it off when they performed together in a distant foreign country. Again, this is in reference to the concerts in real life. Under that, it's about how she helped Agent 8 in Octo Expansion. To the right, it just says her dad is a millionaire who owns Camp Triggerfish, and that he gave her a ship that's the same model as the Manta Maria for her birthday. To the left, it says that when she gets into things, she builds up hype by hopping from side to side. In the Japanese version of Octo Expansion, she does this to build up her special to use the Princess Cannon. This tidbit was left out in the English localization and changed to her just warming up her vocal cords. Now on to Marina. First paragraph, basic information, skilled DJ and singer who's a huge fan of the Squid Sisters. Next, it says that she runs Inkopolis News and is a trailblazer for the Octolings coming to the surface. Under that, it's about how she makes shifty stations and puts them together in a day. To the right, it says that she loves shoujo manga and practices her cross-hatching. To the left, it's about her time in the Octarian army, and the Japanese text says that she got the groove of the squids in her soul after hearing the calamari incantation. Time to go on a tangent. This bit reminds me of a common misconception that I want to clear up. Now there's this theory, or thing I see people assume is canon, that all the Octolings are mind-controlled by Octavio through their goggles or shades, like how Callie was mind-controlled through the Hypno Shades. However, I dug very thoroughly for evidence, and nothing at all about Octolings or even other Octarians being mind-controlled has ever been stated, and if anything, the info I did find points away from this idea. Now I see why people would believe this theory. It's even something I myself believed some years ago. With, again, Callie's Hypno Shades plus lines like this from Marina, saying, "Once our souls have been freed, there's no way we can continue to live under the oppression of Octarian society." I totally see why people would come to the conclusion that they're all mind-controlled, and that the function of the calamari incantation is that it's just a cure for mind control. However, let's factor some other information into this. For one, the Octarians have been stated to be diligent by nature. Tell them to patrol the spot, and they'll do it. It's also implied that the Octarians are fed propaganda and militarized from a young age. You can see that from Marina's military history, and some of the Sunken Scrolls are straight-up anti-Inkling propaganda. I argue that the Octolings in the military don't need goggles to mind control them into following Octavio, because there's an actual sense of loyalty, as all they've known for their entire lives is this militaristic lifestyle, the fact that the Inkling screwed them over after the Great Turf War, and that their leader Octavio has gone in and stolen from the Inklings in an attempt to solve their energy crisis in their crumbling society. Now let's go back to this line Marina says, and it's different in the Japanese version. There, she doesn't denounce Octarian society, she just says that she wants to live together with the Inklings. Now, I'm not trying to argue that Octarian society isn't oppressive, because it is, but this has a totally different nuance to it and implies something different about what the calamari incantation actually does. So, what does the incantation actually do, if not function as a mind control breaker? It seems like it's more of a song of inspiration and empowerment. It inspires some Octolings, like Marina, who have spent their whole lives living in domes, in the military, devoid of natural sunlight, to seek out something more, like where that bangin' music came from. Another issue with the mind control theory is that surely, once these Octolings were free of their supposed mind control, they would hate Octavio. But with Marina, we never really get to hear about what she thinks about Octavio, but what we do have is that on her laptop, next to her stickers of her biggest inspirations, the Squid Sisters, is a giant DJ Octavio sticker. If she really did hate him, which is something she has never expressed, I think she would cover up or remove that sticker. Then, finally, about the glasses itself, it all begs the question of why do all the Octolings have eyewear? From the Japanese name of the Octoling goggles, which are called Octoling scopes, I would say that implies that they help with aiming. For the Octoling shades in the second art book, it says that the red dot is a user interface. Considering the eyewear is part of their soldier uniform, I don't know what that interface would be used for aside from aiding them in combat somehow. And one last thing, here's art from Splatoon's credits of an Octoling having her goggles taken away by Agent 3 and she's asking for them back. So, in short, no, I don't think the Octolings are straight up mind-controlled or hypnotized through their eyewear like Callie was. In general, I don't think the Octarians are mind-controlled at all. If you're still a fan of the hypnotic eyewear theory and want to headcanon it, then go ahead, but I just wanted to highlight that it's not as 100% canonical as some people have been led to believe. I'm thinking of talking more about this topic after Splatoon 3 comes out and see what's up with Octavio there, and I really want to know more about Octarian society, but I'm getting off topic. I want to shift the focus back to Marina because there's one last thing to say about her character biography that I've seen get a lot of attention. Her description here says that she's a real sweetheart, but the Japanese one says that she's a maiden in love. The word for love, koisuru, is exclusively the romantic type. I know there's been a lot of speculation about whether Marina just thinks of Pearl as a friend or has like an actual crush on her. There's this comic that was published in Korokoro, so questionable how canon it is, but it was apparently a special thing from the Squid Research Lab, meaning it is officially sanctioned and drawn by someone on the Splatoon team. And in this manga, it's supposed to be drawn by Marina, and she draws Pearl like a complete bishoujo, and the manga ends with her writing a literal love letter to Pearl. There's no heterosexual explanation for this. Nintendo usually isn't the kind of company that would say outright if a character is gay, but like, I think Marina is a gay little octopus. Moving on to another Octoling, Agent 8. A young Octoling that was brought to the Deep Sea Metro. It says that in Octarian society they were a combatant, so I guess like a foot soldier in a way. I don't think this is something that has been outright stated before, so that's cool. Below that, it says 8 did what other test subjects failed to do, passing the test run by Kamaboko with excellent results. It's unclear whether having the groove of the calamari incantation is a factor of their success. To the right, nothing new, it's just about the final boss fight of Octo Expansion, saying that painting the NILS statue was their first Turf War experience. To the left, it talks about their strong admiration for Agent 3, imagining them to be incredibly powerful. It's not mentioned here, but in the Japanese text it says 8 watched the battle between 3 and Octavio. Now the key word here is imagining. I'm going to take a second to clarify something that I have seen become a point of confusion for some. The inner Agent 3 fight was never real, as in Agent 8 did not actually fight Agent 3 around the same time as 3's battle with Octavio. Hence the name Inner Agent 3. It's just 8 imagining how strong they think Agent 3 is, and that thought is blending in with their memory of watching 3 battle with Octavio. The only times 8 and 3 canonically fought each other was when 3 was brainwashed, and an unseen fight immediately before the start of Octo Expansion, which was long after Agent 3's fight with Octavio. Next, on to Captain Cuttlefish. If you played Octo Expansion, then nothing really new in his info, mostly stuff mentioned in the chat logs. Over 100 years old, grandfather of the Squid Sisters. Down here it's just about his time in the Great Turf War, same stuff mentioned in the Octo Expansion chat logs. And below that, it summarizes his role in Octo Expansion, with how he was patrolling with Agent 3 before winding up in the Deep Sea Metro with 8. To the right, it just says what his full name is. In English, it's Greg Cuttlefish. And to the left, it just talks about how he makes all the Zapfish plushies that take the place of the real Zapfish when you play through a level in Octo Canyon or Octo Valley a second time. Now on to Judd. It says his keen eyes are able to instantly determine the winner of Turf Wars, and that he's the only mammal in the Inkling world, or he was, until Lil Judd was discovered. Says he got his name because of the pattern of his fur and his judging ability. In Japanese, his name is just the English word judge. He uses the knowledge he gets from judging matches to give advice to the Inklings that talk to him. To the left, it talks about how the voice that you hear when first arriving in Inkopolis is not some out-of-universe narrator, it's Judd talking to your player character telepathically. And to the right, it says that Judd was owned by the Professor, who gave Judd an immortality serum and cryogenically froze him for 10,000 years. Of course, I'll talk about Lil Judd next. Says he's the second mammal in the Inklings world. He's always plotting to backstab Judd, but his plans fail because he's too small. He's in charge of judging turf wars with Judd, he gives advice to Inklings who talk to him, and bottom left it says Lil Judd is picky, but is basically an omnivore, but is especially interested in crunchy shrimp. Here it talks about how Lil Judd is a clone of Judd and is concerned about the fact that he is a clone. He was intended to be a backup for Judd in case Judd did not survive the 10,000 years of sleep. Ridiculously minor nitpick, it says Judd's cells, plural, were placed in the capsule, but the second art book specifies it was just one of Judd's cells that were placed in the capsule, which later on multiplied. One question I see come up that hasn't been confirmed outright is if Lil Judd is immortal just like Judd is. Again, it hasn't been confirmed, but I wouldn't be surprised if Lil Judd was immortal as well, considering how he was supposed to be a backup for Judd. And back to the crunchy shrimp thing, time to talk about Krusty Sean. Here it talks about how he ran a shoe store and then a food store and that he's an energetic guy. This is just an explanation of what tickets are and where you get them, and here it talks about why he uses tickets instead of cash. There's a more in-depth explanation than this that was given in a 2018 Famitsu interview. So basically, when Krusty Sean first set up his food truck, the long lines were bothersome to the folks running the shoal, so he worked with the Inkopolis Chamber of Commerce to set up the ticket system to cut down on lines and bring customers into the shoal as well. And lastly, to the bottom right here, it says he can sometimes sense that Judd and Lil Judd are looking at him hungrily, but he doesn't seem to care. Now, on to another Splatoon 1 shopkeeper, Annie. She ran the clothing shop in Splatoon 1 and the online shop in Splatoon 2, says that she's shy, and a new piece of information here is that she's a fan of metal music. Me too. Here it explains her online shop and how it's inundated with orders, and at the bottom it says that Sheldon sometimes asks her to help him decorate weapons. I think this is something that's only been implied but never outright stated. There's promotional art for Splatoon version 2.2.0 that shows her helping Sheldon, and there's also a piece of concept art for Splatoon 2 that shows Annie in Sheldon's shop. It only makes sense for me to talk about Mo next. He has a sharp tongue and is rude to customers, always hides away in Annie's head. It says that Mo looks well fed because Annie feeds him a lot of sweets. Now on to another one of Splatoon 1 shopkeepers, Jalfonzo. It says that most jellyfish do not know how to speak the Inkling language, but he taught himself how to do it, but due to the way he studied, he talks a bit weird. He's a fashion leader among the Inklings, and some Inklings buy his clothes to imitate his style. His store doesn't sell pants because jellyfish don't wear pants. Makes sense. And at the bottom it says he changes his shirt every day, but not his hat. Now onto the other jellyfish, Jalfonzo. He learned to speak the Inkling language on his own, but due to learning from old books, he speaks in an old-fashioned way. His trademark fashion is his hat and bow tie, although I'd argue in the Splatoon community his real trademark is a certain t-shirt of his. He pursues the latest trends and the Inklings recognize him as a fashionista. At the bottom left, it says he looks so much like Jalfonzo that even the Squid Sisters mistake him for Jalfonzo. But in fact, he split off from Jalfonzo, as in Jalfonzo made Jalfonzo through asexual reproduction, so it's like Jalfonzo is Jalfonzo's son. Here's some cursed art from Splatoon's credits of a jellyfish giving birth. At the bottom right, the full details are understandably omitted from the English translation, but it says that he won the National Karuta tournament on his first go because of all the old books that he read to memorize the Inkling language. This tidbit was referenced in Splatoon 2's Sunken Scroll 8, but was never really explained. And Karuta is a Japanese card game that's been around since the mid-1500s. Before Nintendo made video games, this is one of the kinds of card games that they manufactured. So basically, competitive Karuta involves having tons of cards laid out, like 50 of them, each one with the last lines of a classic poem. One person begins to read out the first lines of a poem, and the rest of the players race to find the card that matches the last lines of the poem that's being read. So the game involves memorizing a lot of old poetry, so yeah, that's Jalfonzo's whole deal that's lost outside of Japan. Before moving on from the jellyfish, a note I want to make about them on the chart. On the website, they just say thank you for your purchase. In the Japanese version of the chart, the jellyfish both use their speech quirk, with Jalfonzo's being grammatically broken and Jalfonzo's sounding old-timey. Next, on to Splatoon 2's shoe shopkeeper, Bisque. He gives off a mature vibe, and the 3 shoes he wears are his favorites. He gives some good and kind customer service, and at the bottom it talks about how he left his girlfriend to pursue a band career in the city of Inkopolis, which was previously hinted at in Sunken Scroll 6 and confirmed in a 2018 Famitsu interview. Now moving on to another Splatoon 2 shopkeeper, Flo. They really changed this one in the translation, likely because of Splatoon's rating. In Japanese it says Flo loves to drink alcohol. In the second art book there's art of her getting drunk. It also says that when she gets drunk, she loves teasing cute kids. In the chart, her thoughts on the player character is that they are a cute kid. She also does this with merch, and he does not like it. It says her age is unknown, but seems to be older than the Inklings that hang around the square. And below that, it talks about her shop, and that the Inklings think of her as a cool, older sister kind of lady. And lastly, it says that she wound up in Inkopolis Square while traveling alone. Now for Flo's symbiote, Craymond, a well-behaved shrimp who looks after Flo, but in fact the two need each other. They met while Flo was off traveling alone, when he was worried about her getting lost. The last tidbit here is that he cleans up parasites that may have latched onto Flo, so if you ever wondered if Splatoon fish creatures still get parasites like they do out in nature, the answer is yes. I'm gonna talk about Spike next. He ran a shady back alley business in the first Splatoon game that supposedly earned him over 100 million G, and now he makes money on his PC in the cafe next to Deca Tower, working to keep the goods flowing and the profits moving in the right direction. Random relevant trivia, I brought this up long ago in my economy video, but I was finally able to find a proper source to it. So the G in Splatoon's currency is short for Gesso coin, Gesso being the Japanese word for tentacle. Anyone remember Badge Arcade for the 3DS? Yeah, that's how we know it's called a Gesso coin. And only in the Japanese version of Badge Arcade, because the English version did not translate any of the badge names. Okay, back to Spike. Below that, it talks about how he uses super sea snails to reroll abilities. And lastly, it says that his hometown is in a northern region. Sea urchins are good at processing super sea snails, and they use their needles to dexterously remove the insides. Moving on to Merch, who is in fact friends with Craymond. I wonder if the Splatoon team made them friends because of how there's a species of shrimp and a species of urchin that do have a commensalistic relationship. Anyways, it says that he's in charge of changing gear abilities and developed his own unique method based off of what Spike taught him. His own method involves ability chunks, which the Inklings consider to be more effective than Spike's way of doing things. He delivers the gear from Annie's online shop, and here it says he came from the same hometown as Spike, and came to Inkopolis after reading an article about his success. However, he's probably not earning as much money as Spike is since he deals in snails rather than actual money. And last part talks about how Flo dotes on him and he thinks it's annoying. Now for Sheldon. It says his shop in Booyah Base is a business that's been there since his grandfather's generation, and later he opened a second store in Inkopolis Square. Below that, it just says that he's very passionate about weapons and that he will talk about it on and on, unaware that the Inklings just think he talks too much. And under that, it's about how he loans prototype weapons to Agents 3 and 4 for the sake of data collection. To the left, it says that the building that houses Booyah Base is owned by Sheldon's family. I think this was mentioned before in a 2015 Famitsu interview. And it says here that Sheldon's grandpa, Moses Schellendorf, made a fortune by developing weapons for Octarians during the Great Turf War, which makes it sound like he was working for the Octarians, which is not true. This is another weird translation. The Japanese text specifies he was making anti-Octarian weaponry. And to the right, it says his goggles are really just really strong prescription glasses, as making such fine adjustments to weapons every day made his eyesight deteriorate. Moving on to another weird little guy, Sea Cucumber, who operates the trains on the Deep Sea Metro. Even after Kamabo Corporation's downfall, CQ helps the trains continue operation just for the sake of those living in the deep sea. Below that, it says that CQ detonates this ink-filled backpack on test subjects when they fail, without hesitation. Pointless trivia. This backpack was officially named in Japanese as something that translates to specimen kit. However, the tweet giving the official name was never translated into English, so we don't have an official name for this thing in English. Anyways, the sea cucumbers do this because they are faithful to their duties. And I am using plural they because the sea cucumbers are a life form created solely to operate the Deep Sea Metro, and there are many of them spread throughout the Metro, as managing it is a sizable task. This tidbit was previously mentioned only in Haikata Walker concept art and the Nintendo Dream interview in 2018, so this is the first time it has ever been officially translated into English, so very nice to see. Sticking with the Deep Sea theme, now for the Telephone, who encourages visitors to the Deep Sea Metro to collect the 4 Thangs to reach the Promised Land. Its real name is Commander Tartar, was made 12,000 years ago. Now, I think this passage in English implies some things that aren't so much implied in the Japanese version of this text. One key difference is that here in the English translation, it says Kamaboko. The implications of this would be really interesting, in that it would mean that the company has been around since the human era. But in the Japanese version, it does not say Kamaboko, it says the Deep Sea Metro, which I think makes a lot more sense. I kind of assumed the whole infrastructure of the Deep Sea was from the human era, much like how the Octarian domes were built in the human era as well. So I think this confirms that yes, the Deep Sea Metro is very old. But I think this also means that the idea of Kamabo being around since the human era is not wholly confirmed. It does make more sense to me that the company itself would be Tartar's invention, considering the name Kamabo, or Nell in Japanese, is in reference to blending up fish. But yeah, we don't really know. A lot of Octo expansion lore is hazy. Another thing implied in this English passage that's not so much in the Japanese one is the idea of Tartar being built for the purpose of conducting these tests. So as far as we know for sure, Tartar's mission when it was built by the professor was to pass on knowledge to the next intelligent life. It's a question of, did the professor build Tartar to conduct tests, or is that part of Tartar's own reprogramming to find a new and worthy life form? Again, we don't really know. Octo expansion lore is kinda hazy. So how I had originally translated that section was as follows. It maintains the long-standing Deep Sea Metro while collecting data on new forms of intelligent life and procuring specimens to challenge the facilities at each station. And I think that doesn't really imply anything new aside from the Deep Sea Metro itself being really old. As much as I want some more confirmation about Tartar and the nature of Kamaboko, the translation on this website is giving me trust issues. Moving on to the section below, to the left, it brings up the fact that Tartar and Judd were made by the same professor, and that Tartar was built to keep the next intelligent life from making mankind's mistakes. To the right, it says being left alone for 10,000 years made it go from lonely to completely out of control. Tartar being lonely was previously only mentioned in a couple of dev interviews, so it's nice to see it brought up again. And one more Octo expansion character, my beloved Isopadre. A giant isopod who rides a deep-sea metro. Looks intimidating, but he's a gentleman. The bag he carries, he says, is filled with hopes and dreams. He loves memcakes, but only completed 2 stations in the deep-sea metro. Final trivia is that Isopadre is not his real name. Makes sense. Who would name their kid that anyways? Okay, gonna move to talking about the Octarians, starting with their leader, DJ Octavio. Is engaged with a life-or-death battle with the Inklings, and is described as indomitable and able to get back up after defeat. His wasabi DJ style is unique to him. Next, it says that he used the Hypnoshades to get Callie on his side, and a side note, this artwork right here with the Octoling backed up dancers is from the second art book. Very cool to see it pop up right here. And below that, this is not at all what it says on the Japanese website. There, it says, "The music played throughout the Octarian world is mixed by him. The rhythm regulates the diligent Octarians." Tying back to the thing I said earlier about Marina, Octavio is not mind-controlling his soldiers. Think of regulate here like how a commander keeps a military in line or gives them a beat to march to. Or propaganda. To the right it says he once hijacked Inkling airwaves to provoke the Inkling world. The Inklings, however, thought it was a new promotion or something and didn't care, but they thought the music was cool. And to the left, it's about how he lived in harmony with the Inklings before the Great Turf War. Naturally, moving on to the Octarians themselves, and the translations in this section are kinda wonky. They are inhabitants of the underground Octarian world. They are extremely diligent, and they move in an orderly fashion along with the music that is played in Octarian society. The sentence subjects in this below passage are really off. The translator might have assumed this Octostomp was the subject of these sentences and not the Octarians as a whole. The Octarians possess highly developed scientific technology, including the Great Octo-Weapons, which nearly defeated the Inklings in the Great Turf War. Their tech capabilities are said to be a full 15 years ahead of the global average. The Octarians are diligently focused on getting the job done, to the point where they pay no mind to making things look pretty. To the right, it talks about sanitized Octarians, how they have their individuality destroyed as part of the sanitization process. And to the left, the translation's a little weird because it doesn't specify what they're being separated from. So there are 2 types of Octarians. Individuals that are severed from a host and remain as tentacles, and those that can assume a humanoid form. The more limbs they have, the more intelligent they are. I made a whole video about Octarian reproduction because it is a topic brought up in official sources, but there is seemingly conflicting information. The first art book says all Octarians are only capable of asexual reproduction as they are created from severed tentacles, with the word Octarian being a blanket term that can apply to Octolings as well. But to sum up that video I made, I came to the conclusion that the passage from the art book only applies to Octarians that look like severed tentacles. The Octoling DJ Warabi has parents, and from the Octoling Paul, it seems that young Octolings grow up in a similar way to Inklings, as in, they don't come from tentacles. Additionally, in a 2018 Famitsu interview, it was stated that Octarians like the playable Octolings and rival Octolings are the same species. The only difference is that the rival Octolings are older than the playable ones. Meanwhile, Octarians like Octotroopers and other ones that look like tentacles were described as a different thing from the Octolings, the difference being that these Octotroopers have been severed and cannot take on a humanoid form. The word they used for severing in that interview is the exact same word they're using here to refer to severing from a host. So I believe this passage here furthers the idea that not being created from a severed tentacle is what differentiates the Octolings from other Octarians. However, I can also see how this can be read as, like, being severed from a tentacle is not the differentiating factor between Octolings and other Octarians, but being able to assume a humanoid form is. But I think that would conflict with the 2018 interview, and adding more conflicting information to this topic is just agony. And there's still some details about Octarians that are up in the air. Like, is this host that they're referring to just any Octarian getting a haircut? Or is there one big special host like Octavio or something else? And also, like, how much does the Octarian army utilize cloning? Are they cloning their Octoling soldiers as well, or is it just the Octotroopers? I'd love some answers, but unfortunately the Splatoon team does not give us a lot of details about Octarian society, and they could really just go and throw something out of left field at us. So that's enough of that. Now for something else we don't know a lot about, Mr. Grizz. A mysterious entity, seen by nobody, and unknown whether he really exists. The benefit package for Grizzco is described as excellent, free transportation, no overtime, and free uniform rental. It says that golden eggs are used as a potent energy source and may be contributing to the overall energy supply in Inkling society. Golden eggs being a more powerful energy source and Mr. Grizz distributing said golden eggs to the Inkling world are things I've speculated for a long time. I'm so glad this has finally been confirmed outright. All we knew for sure before was that power eggs were a source of energy, but it wasn't 100% on how much that applied to golden eggs, or if Mr. Grizz was keeping the golden eggs, or distributing some of them into the Inkling world. But now we know. Now over here it says some Inklings have gotten a bit addicted to the experience of using the illegally modified Grizzco weapons, since it's a thrill you can't get in normal turf wars. And last but certainly not least, the Salmonids. They can live in both land and water, and are clad in cookware in hopes of being cooked in a delicious way. They have the intelligence to weaponize junk that sinks underwater. Previously, this info was in a 2018 Famitsu interview, so I'm glad to see this written in English in an official capacity. Below that, it talks about Omega-3 and how captivating their music is. To the right, it talks about the Salmonid Octarian trade agreement, which was again mentioned in a Famitsu interview, and as well as the second art book. And to the right, it makes a reference to Sunken Scroll 17. According to folklore, when smoke arose from the Seven Rings, a large number of Salmonids headed to the surface and proceeded to eat everything. Once again, the true meaning of this folklore is not explained, but I did realize something. The Seven Rings is likely in reference to a shichirin, which is a small charcoal grill, and the literal translation of the kanji for it is Seven Rings. Yeah, that's the same tattoo Ariana Grande got. And with that, that is all of the character pages, and I guess that's the end. And I once again accidentally made a 40-minute video. Well, seriously, thank you to my dear Patreon patrons for your patience with my semi-erratic video postings, and thank you for your support, and really, thank you all for watching to the end. I still have videos I had planned for before the launch of Splatoon 3, but oh my god, it's coming so soon, I don't think I'll get to all of it before then. But I'm at least gonna try and get out something before Splatoon 3 launches. Also, in September, I'm going to be moving to Japan for the next year or so things are gonna be chaotic. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Take care.